Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of Responsibility, a Mindset 365 initiative. My name's Ben Williamson, and each month I'll take you into the mindset of ordinary people who operate in high stress conditions. Together, we find out who they are, what they do, why they do it, and importantly, the how. So why is a high performing mindset so important in life? Well, at Mindset 365, I concentrate on preparing the person for the path, not the path for the person. So let's see who's in the hot seat this week and find out their responsibility. So welcome to another edition of Responsibility, and this week, I've probably been talking about this a little bit off camera, and I don't want to disappoint anybody here, but this man, when I set this podcast up, all 3 podcasts ago, he was in the forefront of my mind because I know he typifies what it means when we talk about responsibility. Really distinguished career and still going, still young, still in the trenches, but a really good chat coming up. So strap yourself in, I can't wait. But welcome, Woon Ooi. How are you, mate?
Good, thanks, Ben. How are you?
No pressure?
Yes.
We've been mates for a while now.
Yeah.
Very lucky to meet you in a toilet. Funny
Yes.
enough, when we first met.
That's right.
Yeah. Both coaches, both doing our thing, bumped into each other and been mates since.
Yeah, it's been great.
What a cool career you've had over the journey. And I learnt that 7 days with you in a course, in the car, back and forth.
Yeah.
And it was very funny because I think you did mention at the time, you said to me, look, just so you know, I'm a bit of an introvert. I thought, that's okay. I said, you can have a sleep if you want to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a bit the opposite. But if you want to sleep, you can, you have sleep. Yeah, that's great. We didn't stop talking for 7 days straight. I don't think up and down the road. Yeah, good times.
Yeah, I'm still catching up on my sleep now.
Apologies. I mentioned distinguished career. We got a lot to get through for you. But firstly, I think we'll just go back and just talk about, growing up for you, where that was, and what it looked like before we sort of get into that other side of it.
Yeah, so I was born in Malaysia, and I didn't know till I was 37, so I'm 44 now, almost 45. But I didn't know till I was 37 that I was actually adopted at birth. So it was a bit of a secret in the family.
Yeah.
And so I was adopted as an infant by a Chinese-Malaysian family, and stayed in Malaysia, educated in Malaysia till I was about 5. Mum and dad are very successful business people, owned a transport freight industry, freight company there. And then we moved to Australia as most migrants do, because Australia's amazing. With all the services that we have here, all the opportunities, and just really fair game for everybody. Back home, a lot of people don't know, if you visit Malaysia or other Asian countries, that there's actually a lot of limitations based on your age, your gender, your religion, your background, your ethnicity. So for all the faults that Australia has, it's a wonderful country. That's why everyone comes here. So yeah, moved to Frankston. So back in the 80s, my parents didn't know, but it was a bit of a baptism in fire.
So what was the connection to Frankston?
So my mum's younger sister owned a restaurant in Frankston. So we moved there to be with her because just somewhere to start in Australia. Yeah. And it was pretty rough, to be honest. My first day at school, I went home. I actually went to the doctors to get 5 stitches in my head before I went home.
Day one.
Oh. Yeah, day one. And I remember not being able to speak English. I could, you can still tell when people are talking about you, and whether that's a story I made up about myself or not, don't know. But I did go home after getting touched up a little bit at school. And my memories between 5 and 7 was just survival, just pure survival. Until my mum and dad said, you know what, let's give him a bit of a change, and we'll take him to Geelong. And we moved in up the road, and mum and dad are still there, just up in Bourke Street, 2 k's from here. Yeah. And things were different then.
No stitches day one?
No stitches.
Day 2?
Day 2, closer. But it was a bit different because I went to Rollins Primary School, and you might know that one up in Bourke Street.
Yeah, yep.
And it's majority, foreigners that were there. I actually learned how to speak Macedonian Like, I could
Really?
converse in Macedonian.
Wow.
Because the majority of the people there were Macedonian, Croatian, Serbian, and Italian Greeks.
And still are, I think. It's still a big community.
Still are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, where you live, you probably notice.
Yes.
Because I still remember my friends' parents, they would leave really early in the morning and they wouldn't, like 6, and they wouldn't get back till 6. And they're still doing it. So that's why I love this side of town, because there's never any traffic during school time.
It's true.
Yeah,
that's
because
true.
all the mums and dads have gone to work already.
Yep.
And then they come home after school time and the usual knock-off time for work.
Yep.
So that's predominantly where I grew up.
Okay. Yep.
And then mum and dad owned a restaurant in Geelong, in Yarra Street, called Summer Palace. Yeah. Which is now the Palace of the Orient, where you can do karaoke as well. Yeah, which is awesome.
What's your go-to?
Oh, gee, I don't know. Hero, Enrique Iglesias, got to do it. Yeah. I love the power ballads.
Yeah. Do you take your own playlist in there with you?
Look, it wasn't there. Karaoke wasn't there when mum and dad had it.
Okay.
But this was 1990.
Yeah.
So that's when things started getting a bit funny for me.
Okay.
So I was around 10. So mum and dad, really hardworking, as most first generation migrants are. I was raised by my auntie, occasionally go and hang out with my mum and dad at the restaurant. And what my mum and dad didn't know was that, the gangs started moving into Geelong. In fact, they started coming from Cabramatta, Parramatta. And you might have seen a documentary called Once Upon a Time in Little China, I think it's called, Once Upon a Time in Little China. And there was I forgot his name, but his surname was Nguyen. He's a pastor now, actually. But he was part of that 5T, they called it, which was a Vietnamese gang. Now, they started moving heroin around the East Coast, and then it came down the East Coast to Footscray, Victoria. And then it started infiltrating into Geelong. And then there was a bit of a turf war over heroin sales then between the Asians and the Europeans. Anyway, mum and dad used to give me 20-cent pieces from the payphone that sat on their counter. So you used to put 20 cents in and dial a number, right?
Yeah, but did you dial it or did we pull it around?
I think this was push button.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And he used to empty the trays into the till, and then Dad would have to pay telecom or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, with those 20-cent pieces, he used to give it to me to go down to Golden Q. Do you remember the Golden Q?
No.
Okay. He didn't know that that's where the gangs hung out.
Ah.
So
and you're 10?
I was 10.
Yep.
I was 10, and that's where I started smoking, drinking, doing all the stuff that you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And then the gangs brought me in. So my life started to take a turn then. By the time I was 14, I was technically homeless by definition.
Wow.
Couch surfing, away months at a time from home, occasionally going to school, things like that. And then, found myself with my, life a little bit off track. But around at the end of high school, I don't know how I got myself through high school. But
so you're still going to school this whole time?
On and off.
Yeah, okay.
You know what? I was pretty clever.
Yeah.
Which probably was my downside because I didn't have to try at school, so I got bored.
You're right.
Yeah. So I could get away with attending every so often and just passing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ticking boxes where you had to.
Yeah.
But all the while, your associations are with all these gangs, bikies, older men teaching you these things that you just don't want to be going down.
I didn't know. When you're 10, you don't know.
Yeah.
When you're 12, you don't know.
Yeah.
And 4 years in, it's just your life.
Yep.
And they make you feel like you're part of the family.
Yep.
And that's the irony, right? Because in the end, the reason why I got out of it is because they threatened my life.
Wow.
And
How old
so
were you?
I was 18.
Wow.
And then I fled Geelong to go to Melbourne to turn my life around. And Mum had a house in Melbourne, so I stayed there.
Yeah.
Managed to scrape myself through high school and get into Swinburne University in software engineering. Man, I wish I continued that.
Nowadays,
oh, seriously,
knowing what you know now.
The people that I used to go to uni with, they're living another life. Seriously. But I deferred to, because I was in the engineering faculty, but I could tell all the cool kids who were in the business faculty.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to do that. So I deferred to a business marketing advanced diploma, which I finished.
Yeah.
And and then after that, saw a commercial on TV for Victoria Police, and there I was.
How many years later? After you saw that sign, did you?
No, I put in straight away.
You straight away? Yep.
Yeah, so I applied when I was 20.
Yep.
And I got into VicPol when I was 21, so
Yep.
2021. Yeah.
Tell me about that experience. How was that?
Every day was a blessing, right?
Yeah.
Because I was an idiot. I was a dead set idiot. I was immature, and if no one in their right mind, if they actually could search my soul, would have given me a badge and a gun. Like, seriously. Seriously.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, wow.
you know, I'm just looking back now, and that's why I look at these young pups coming through, and I'm like, man, they need mentoring.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They need people, because you're given a lot of power.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of authority, a lot of responsibility.
And a lot of it goes straight between the ears.
Yeah.
The power side of things.
You know, unintentionally, I think it
Yes.
consume you. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of insight, self-awareness. A lot of people who you know, genuinely care about you and believe in the greater good. It takes a lot of courage to be able to say that to someone and see that in someone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wish I had that.
Yep.
I wish I had that. So I'm surprised I last 23 years, but I'm so thankful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so thankful.
But day one, so
Yeah.
take me back to the training college.
Yep.
So even the previous 8, or let's say 12 years that you've just been through from a 10-year-old,
Yes.
how did that probably set you up for day one?
The only thing that it gave me was a bit of, like, okay, just, you know, in full disclosure,
Yeah.
I was arrested a couple of times,
Yep.
and it showed up on my record. Mm-hmm. But I was always told your juvenile records are wiped by the time you're 18.
More advice.
So I'm sitting there at my interview to get into the police force, and they're like, you know, have you ever been involved with police before? And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking 12, 13, 14, juvenile records get wiped at 16 or closed or whatever it is. And I said, no, I haven't. And they go, really? And he looks at me and he goes, well, I'll give you one chance to, you know, to be completely honest with me, to answer that question again. And I'll go, how far back do you want me to go? I remember this.
You've opened yourself up.
Oh, I remember this so clearly. He looks through the documents, and I know what they are now because I sat on recruit boards since.
Yeah.
And he's flicking through, it's my dossier, and it was pages worth.
Oh.
All associations, things like that. And he goes, try 2010. And I went, oh, hang on, no, try 1990. And I went, oh gosh, he's got it all. So I just started from the start, and I just told him everything, basically what I told you with a bit more detail. And he goes, you know, I'm glad you're honest with me, because had you not have been, we wouldn't let you pass this stage. So back then, they were taking people with history. So the advantage I had was a bit of street, you know, experience on the street.
And they could probably see that.
And I didn't know this at the time, but there was a job that was getting worked up whilst they were recruiting me, okay? It was Johnny Lynn's kidnapping. The operation was called Mandola, okay? So Johnny Lynn got kidnapped in Glen Waverley. At the same time I applied. I didn't know that I would have been one of 2 Mandarin-speaking officers ever in Victoria Police. So Johnny Lynn's kidnappers were Mandarin-speaking.
Wow.
Yeah. So the question that haunts me is, would I have got through if not for Johnny Lynn?
You don't need to know the answer to that question. Yeah, you want to stop asking that question. But isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Because before you're even in, this is what I find astonishing. Right? Before you're even in, their foresight to say, this is what we can do with this person. This person can be such an asset to us. But if you weren't honest, that's the other part of it too.
I like that.
If you weren't honest, what's the difference between asking yourself the question between Johnny Lynn and you know, your honesty component too?
Yeah.
Not knowing what you know, perception. It's
Yeah.
incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got through.
I got through by the skin of my teeth.
Honesty pays. Honesty.
Yes. But I also got through the academy by the skin of my teeth as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Look, all my life, I've never excelled at anything. Yeah. I've always been either average or just a little bit above average.
I'd beg to differ. But
100%.
Yep.
100%. And I didn't have the charisma that you have, let's say. I didn't have the understanding of teamwork as you do, because I wasn't brought up with team sports. Yeah, I was brought up with individual sports. And the bit I skipped over was I was a martial artist since I was 7 years old. Yeah, because makes sense. I was getting beaten up for 2 years.
Yep.
Dad goes, I'll stick you in martial arts. So everything I did, martial arts, tennis, music, it was all individual pursuits. Yeah. So my advice is now to anybody is do team sports.
Yep.
If you've got a choice between being an elite individual athlete or joining a team, join a team. Join a team, and I can get into a little bit more about that later on. But I'll mention a little bit about it now. But when I was selecting for the critical incident response team, I could see patterns. I was there for 11 years, so I could see we'd do 2 or 3 intakes a year, and we'd start with 500 applicants. We'd finish with about 10 that passed the course.
Were they all internal applicants?
From
Vic
Vic
Pol?
Pol.
Yes.
Yeah. So I could see the ones after a while who make it and who don't.
Yeah.
Right. So the ones that are, elite tennis players, we've had them, marathon runners, all those individual sports, track and field and all that, they do really well through the first gateway. But then that's great because we want to see that, you've got determination, you've got the right mindset and all that type of stuff. You can look after yourself. But then when they start moving through gateway 2, 3, 4, then the intake, they don't make it.
Yeah.
And the ones that make it are the ones that are mediocre in the first gateway, but then all the team players, the football players, the soccer players, the netball players, they're the ones that thrive.
What are you seeing in them? What are the patterns you're seeing in them?
So this is the thing, right?
Yeah.
What I've noticed. And this is what we train for. And this is what we look for in people. We put them under the pump so that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
Yeah. So right down the bottom is the need for survival.
Yeah.
We will get you into a survival state and then we'll see what you're made of.
Critical thinking.
Yeah. Well, more heart.
Yep.
Yeah. So we can give you skill, but we can't give you character. Okay. So we're looking for character in the selection stages. Yeah.
Yep.
And then obviously the ability to learn skills quickly and adapt and be flexible within situations, right? So we will get you into your survival state and then we will see your true character come out. The ones that turn inwards, they're the ones that quite often fail. When the chips are down, the ones that look up and out and how can I help you and asking for help to help me and being vulnerable in that exchange, they're the ones that thrive in the team.
So much power in that, isn't there?
Oh, it's life, right?
Do you know what I find astonishing with that too? This is what I love about that.
Yeah.
You don't know how you're going to react in that situation.
You don't.
I'm guessing, but you could give someone a brief on what you've just told me and said, this is what we're going to do tomorrow.
Yep.
That doesn't mean that when you're in the fire, you can still do it.
Yep.
Because a lot of that is just, it's a stress response, isn't it? It's your stimulus response in the moment.
Yeah.
And your body, ultimately, knowing what happens with the brain, your prefrontal cortex can often be compromised. So then you have to be able to think clearly through really difficult situations when your brain's effectively offline.
Yes. And Ben, you know this better than anyone, right? The way to overcome that, one of the ways is exposure. Yeah. And a little bit off topic, but this is why I raise my 3 girls the way we raise our 3 girls, is constant exposure. Yeah. I think if you wrap people up in safety, what you're basically doing is you're shielding them from exposure, yeah, from risk, right? But the way to overcome the stress response is to give gentle exposure over time so that it's no longer triggering for you, if that makes sense. So that's what we do in training.
Yeah.
We have a saying, you should never experience something for the first time out in the field.
Yeah.
It should be in training.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then also develop the person with enough skill and adaptability to be flexible if something changes out there that you don't expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a high performance mindset, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of the stuff that we talk about, or you and I talk about, or I talk about with Mindset 365.
Yes.
You need to be able to practice this when things are going well.
100%.
If you have processes that you know work to get you from sort of high emotion back to rational thinking, back up to that seesaw level.
Yep.
If you know what your processes are, if you're not practicing when it's going good, you cannot get into that when you're in red.
And it's also pattern recognition.
Yes.
Right? So I used to, because of my background, which I've just told you about, I do have some father issues, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, when I'm fathering my 3 girls, and one in particular is exactly like me, when I have a blue with her, I'm devastated. Yeah. It takes me back to my childhood.
Triggering.
It takes me back to, non-acceptance, being given away, all that type of stuff. Brings all that up. So I speak to my psychologist about this, and many, many years ago, and she said to me, what you're teaching her is actually really healthy. It's about rupture and repair. Because I used to have rupture, like an argument with her, I'll cause a rupture in our relationship, and then I'll sit in the rupture, and it's devastating. And she reframed it for me. She goes, it's actually the best thing you can do for her. Because you're showing her a pattern in her life where it's rupture followed by repair. And so, which means she goes with that pattern into the future. And if she falls into some type of, devastating spot or whatever it is, or some challenge.
Which will happen.
It will happen, yeah. She'll know that it's just part of the pattern, and then after ruptures, repair. And Jung said it, right? Carl Jung, love Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Before every ascent, there's a descent. Yeah. And the deeper the descent, the higher the ascent, right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Absolutely.
So that really released me a little bit. Look, I still struggle with it, but that gave me a lot of release, knowing that it's okay. Just because you have a bad day, have an argument or whatever like that, it's okay. Because there's going to be repair, and it's going to be better than before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But giving yourself evidence of that, I think, is paramount. But what you've just told us, previously to where you were at, to where you were, at 18 years old, where you were from 10 to 18 years old.
Yes.
That typifies that.
Yes.
Because you could have gone down a completely different path.
Again, I'm just really grateful. I'm really grateful because majority of the people that I spent those years with, I saw either die or go to jail.
Wow.
There's probably one that I know of that hasn't died or gone to jail.
Wow.
Yeah. And we keep in contact occasionally via text.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so grateful, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, you're kicking goals. But I want to talk about, so we briefly discussed VicPol entering.
Yes.
Your career within VicPol for 23 years was very distinguished. And I love the stories that you bring and what you talk about so openly.
Yes.
We're talking about sort of high pressure situations. I know any day would be high pressure with Victoria Police, but what in particular were some of the roles that you did? And you mentioned one of them with CERT, but what particularly in those roles did you have responsibility of?
Yeah.
And what did it look like? What were some of the jobs that you sort of were confronted with?
Just in CERT, or you want me to start from the start? I'll give you an overview.
Anything, because I know you had a lot of different roles within VicPol.
Yeah, okay.
So even go back to the start, was your first one, and then work your way through.
So really quickly, when I left the academy, you're supposed to do 3 days of waving your arms around, which is traffic management. You get signed off by the chief.
Collins Street.
Yep, all those intersections.
Yep.
And then you do 3 months in City Patrol Group, which is now Melbourne East. Then you go to your training station for 2 years. I did my 3 days of waving my arms around, and then I walked in for shift number 4, reported to the sergeant's desk for my duties. I'm ready to go out on the street on foot patrol. And he said, go up to the boss's office. So I still remember walking up the stairs in City Patrol Group over to the boss's office, and Senior Sergeant Harbeck was there. He's retired now, great man. And I went to take a seat, and he goes, don't bother. I go, what do you mean?
I lasted 3 days in VicPol. I was waving my arms the wrong way.
And he puts a Form 47 in front of me, which is a report, and on top of it, it's got the subject line, and it says, and I read it, and I said, what does secondment mean? I couldn't even say secondment properly. I go, what does secondment mean? And he goes, that means you're packing up your lockers and there's a car waiting for you downstairs. And I went, okay. Now I'm worried and intrigued. So I went downstairs, I jumped into this unmarked car and I just disappeared off into the St Kilda Road Police Complex.
Like on the movies.
Like in the movies. And then most of my my recruit squad, people were doing foot patrol and picking up shoplifters, and I'm working on Johnny Lynn's kidnapping from day 4.
Yep.
And my first brief, when their first brief was shoplifting, my first brief was actually an explosives job. So I was driving around following leads by myself because we're still looking for the offenders for the kidnapping. And a job comes over in Belgrave for explosives. So long story short, bunch of kids went and did a burglary at the Doncaster quarry and 100 kilos of ammonium nitrate and 90 kilos of power gel. They stole that and 118 electric detonators. And they stored it at this place in Belgrave where they lived. Yeah. They used some of the explosives to blow up a HSV Commodore in Glen Waverley. Oh. And then they also did a firearms burg in Box Hill. So I was Johnny on the spot. The next person or detective that was closest to me, this was night shift, was the inspector.
So you're one up at this point,
night
shift?
Inspector Kim West, right? So Kim West is also retired, great man. Yeah. And I rang him and I said, man, I've got this lead. The explosives are stored in this house in Belgrave. And he goes, mate, you can't get anywhere near that with a phone or a radio. You need to park your car up top of the hill and you need to walk down there on foot. Like, I'm fresh out of the academy.
Yeah, wow, this is incredible.
So obviously, I was a bit nervous about that.
Yes.
But I had to get the job done.
Yep.
So I went down there. He goes, you need to go down there, recce the house, see who's in there, see whether you can see the explosives, take note of all the cars that are in there, all the regos and all that, write it all down in the dark, don't use a torch, and then make your way back up to the car and let me know. So I did that. Anyway, long story short, it was fine. We retrieved all the explosives, we arrested all the guys, and as it turned out, right, it was 4 lovely kids in university, watched too many movies, wanted to challenge themselves, really high-functioning intellectual kids. Yep. Never had involvement in police before, never done the wrong thing, it just got out of control. Yeah. So anyway, that was my first brief.
Probably a good thing though. I think probably a good thing that you weren't walking into a complete fire. Well, baptism of fire sometimes, but...
Well, Kim said to me, we need to get these guys out because the electric detonators, ammonium nitrate, very volatile, could go off at any time, as you know. So we literally kicked the door down, the 2 of us. Never done any injuries training then. Yeah. But Kim said, you know what you're doing, don't you? And I go, oh, not really. He goes, no, you'll be right. He kicks the door and he goes, you go left, I'll go right. He sent me towards the bedrooms because he knew they were asleep. Yeah. So I'm arresting 3 guys by myself. Wow. In 3 different bedrooms, right? Incredible. And he's clearing the kitchen and living room and all that.
You having a coffee?
But anyway, I'm here to tell the story.
I love it. Can you remember the feeling? You remember what you were going through? Like
just freaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, just freaking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hijack brain.
Man, I'm so glad I didn't fight back. And I'm so glad there were clean skins.
Yes.
Yeah, so glad. Yeah.
But going on as your career evolved, obviously there weren't so many clean skins.
Yeah. So because of that opportunity, I did end up going to Melbourne City, which is my training station, about 6 months later. I kind of got bored of the divvy van really quickly. So I was keen to try anything. And most coppers join the job to catch crooks and drive fast cars, right? Yep. So there was this opportunity to work as a youth resource officer in Kensington, running the school holiday program for these kids that live in the commission housing. Nobody wanted to do it because everyone wanted to drive fast cars, catch crooks. Yep. And I went, you know what, I'm sick of that already. I'll put my hand up. It's the best thing I ever did. My advice is always, and you know this, I think Joe told us, say yes, work it out later.
Absolutely.
So I put my hand up. Yep. And it was the best thing ever. Yeah. Because I hang out with these kids that used to run from me when I drive up to the Kensington flats. When they saw the divvy van, they'd run. Yeah. But now I'm hanging out with them at, in a completely different context, taking them bowling, swimming, skating, all that type of stuff, all paid for, work time. Yeah. And working with an agency called Dudagala, Vic Pol and Dudagala work together. Yeah. Anyway, after that, whenever I used to roll up in the divvy van, when they start running, I'd yell out, "Hey, Mustafa, it's Woon." And they're like, "Oh, nah, he's cool, man." And he'll bring all the kids in.
Yeah.
And we hang out on the playground, we chat and all that, right? Best thing ever.
Building rapport.
Because I'll be like, "Hey guys, you know what? Such and such has got a warrant. I'm not going to lock him up. I just need to re-bail him." He goes, "Oh, that's cool, man." So they'll ring him up, he'll come down, I'll stick him in a van, take him to, and I'm true to my word, I'll re-bail him, get him a new court date and he's back again. So I was clearing my warrant stats like really quickly because of this rapport I was building with these kids.
Yeah.
So my warrant stats went up, right?
Yeah.
So that opened up opportunities to become an investigator in the sex offence and child abuse investigation unit. So at the time, you needed to be a senior constable to be able to get in. But I was an acting senior constable because of my experience with these kids in this youth program.
Yeah.
So they said, "Yeah, sure, we'll take you."
So how many years into Big Pole were you now?
Man, it wasn't long.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to do
Fast.
4.5 years back then to be able to do anything,
Yeah.
like highway or anything. I reckon I was probably 2.5 years in.
Yeah, wow.
And I got a job there.
Yeah.
So kind of broke ground there. And then I did that for 3.5 years, which was pretty tough. Just speaking to adults and kids, that were sexually abused. Yeah. So I needed to have a change. The average lifespan for that's around 2.5 years. I did 3.5, so I thought that was pretty good. And then I joined I took a completely 180 just to get away from that. And then I became a operational safety and tactics training officer. So I learnt how to become an instructor for firearms and defensive tactics and, room clearance, all that type of stuff. So I did that for 3 years in Essendon, which was fun. So I kind of got my head out of the investigation space. And then there was an opportunity to apply for a sergeant's position at the trainer unit. And it was like, I wasn't qualified, right? But I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring anyway. Put in my application for an interview, passed the first stage, my KSC, got an interview, and in front of me was Craig Walsh, who's a legend, Billy Duncan, who's another legend, and they were interviewing me.
And you knew these guys?
No,
Okay.
but I know them to be legends now,
Yeah.
and when we get to Bourke Street, we'll join the dots.
Yeah.
But because I didn't think I was in for a chance, because I was way underqualified, I was way underexperienced for a sergeant's position back then, I just went for it. And one of the questions was, what would you fix about OST and training in Vic Pol in general? So I just gave it to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honesty, once again.
Honesty,
Yeah.
good, yeah, good pickup. Billy Duncan stopped writing, put his pen down and just glared at me. And I went, man, I'm not going to get this job. So I just went for it again. I went harder.
Yeah.
Anyway, I get the job. So I get promoted. So I get promoted to sergeant. And I didn't set out to make any records, right? But I'm told that I was the youngest sergeant in Victoria Police history back then.
This doesn't surprise me.
But now people are getting promoted way earlier than I was. Yeah. I was just kind of broke ground.
Yeah.
And it was because of Craig Walsh and Billy Duncan. Yeah. And I still speak to them now.
Yeah.
And they promoted me because they saw something in Craig. Craig actually said to me, he goes, I said yes because you didn't give a F word.
Yeah.
And he goes, and I liked it.
Yeah.
So I gave you a shot.
Yeah.
But because I was so young, so inexperienced, I was actually appealed by everybody in the process. It was like one of the largest appeals in history, in the Police Appeals Board.
Just for grounds with that, appealing is everybody else in the pool who's gone for an interview haven't got the job, so they flagged it and said, hey, we challenge that.
100%.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So I put in a 28-page brief into the Appeals Board. They read it out and they went, don't bother guys, he's got the job. So I get the job. So this was 3 months after I got the job, right?
Yeah.
And I get confirmation. 3 days after I get confirmation, I'll get my hooks, my 3 stripes. I'll get called up to the boss's office back then, which was at the academy. And they said, you know what? The biggest bushfire in our history has just happened. And we need sergeants up there to man the command post. I was 3 days in.
Wow.
And I was undercooked. And Dodsey, who was a senior sergeant back then, is still a really good mate of mine now.
Yeah.
he was my senior sergeant. He said, "You're going to Alexandria. You're getting deployed as a forward commander." And I went, "Dude," talk about freaked out.
Wow.
So I spent the next few weeks up at Alexandria in the recovery effort for Black Saturday. So that was my first job as a sergeant.
Black Saturday, straight into it. So for context, forward commander is virtually in charge of that operation. There's only one more that probably sits above you, maybe two. So you're there. You are the absolute conduit for so many other operatives underneath you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you know what? I stuffed so many things up. And I'm not proud of this. Yeah. But we left because we just didn't know what we were doing. But we left 2 recruits at the bottom of the spur without radio or phone comms for 18 hours, no food, no water.
Wow.
They should be given a medal. Yeah. So, because we stuffed up.
What happened in that context? Just so much happening?
There was so much happening.
Yeah.
Like we were doing crazy stuff. Like we were going through houses looking for bodies, remains. And if we didn't find any, we'd tie a blue ribbon. If we found someone in there, remains, we'd tie a red ribbon, right? And these ribbons, because it was so gusty, were getting blown away. So the ribbons ended up on different properties and all that type of stuff, right? Yeah. So we had to go through again with the search and rescue, who had GPS plotting devices. Yeah. So it was just a mess. We were just underprepared for something like that, undertrained, underexperienced. Look, it's a different police force now. As far as emergency management, Vic Pol's all over it. But back then, we were undercooked. Yeah. Yeah.
But if we talk about responsibility, okay, so if that happens again, what happens with Vic Pol in those days, especially with debriefs, hot debriefs, these sorts of things?
Didn't happen.
Just didn't happen?
No.
Wow.
I can't remember one.
So you're just filtering your own thoughts and everybody else's around you that, okay, these things have happened. Yeah. Okay, it wasn't great, but what's this trying to do better next time? In your own head, really. Yeah. There's nothing to go through, no context.
And look, what you said then is perfect. Try and do better next time. Yeah. And this is where I went from that sergeant's position to the critical incident response team. Yeah. And every day I had an opportunity to try and do it better next time. Yeah. And that's where I really thrived, because I was in that, 132 operators, and I was in that space where everyone had the same mindset. We just want to do better. And it was such a blessing to be there, man. Yeah. So
tell us about CERT. First of all, what is CERT and what did it look like for you? How many years?
I did 11 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
So what it looked like, so CERT stands for Critical Incident Response Team. It's a tier 2 tactical team. Yeah.
So if we look at the news, we see guys going with massive body armour and big shields and helmets, all that sort of stuff. You're the boots on the ground.
Yeah, so we do have the Bearcat. So not to be mistaken with the Special Operations Group. Yep. So they were a PTG, Police Tactical Group, tier 1 tactical element in Victoria. Underneath that, we sit in the same division and the same office, is the Critical Incident Response Team. So the SOG have got amphibian capabilities as well as, roping capabilities and things like that. They're moving more into the counter-terrorism space. Okay. As they're transitioning, we're filling the gap for them, right? Okay, yep. So now you'll see the SOG in completely different garb. Yep. So we are more darker uniform now, where they're a little bit lighter. So we wear the helmets, the balaclavas, got the armoured vehicle, all that type of stuff. Okay, so that's us. Yep. Now, most of the time, so our charter is we will respond to anything that's beyond the capabilities of general duties coppers and detectives and such, right? Yep. So that's really subjective, because some members have got more capabilities, some areas have got more capabilities, particularly country policing, they look after their own business. Yeah. So when the country call us and they fit into beyond their capabilities, we know it's serious, because they're used to looking after their own staff. So most of our serious job would be out in the country, but then we'd get called by more junior staff within the metropolitan area for all sorts of stuff. So that was our charter. Everybody has to pass the basic operators course. Once you pass the basic operators course and qualify, and done your time, you get to apply to be a siege hostage negotiator, which I did, and also a close personal protection operative, which I did. So we call it triple threat as just a bit of a joke, but you've got the operator's ticket, you've got CPP, and you've got the negs.
Wow. Yeah. Which, to the average person, just knowing that, It sounds so intense in terms of the training aspect that you would have had to go through. I'd imagine there's a lot of training to go through that. I mean, you've effectively got other people's lives in your hands at any given moment in those situations.
Yeah. You know, the people's lives in my hands that I really thought about was my teammates.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and not only their lives, but every time I make a tactical decision, because I went in straight as a supervisor, so I had to make tactical decisions on behalf of my team. And I not only had their best interests, their safety in mind, but I also know their family. Yes. I make a conscious decision to get to know them and their family. Not all of them opened up. Yeah. In the end, probably 95% of them did. Yeah. So I knew their wives' names, their kids' names, how old they are. So when I make a tactical decision, I also think about them and go, is the risk or the benefit, does it outweigh, you know, them, their family, their safety, their future, their dreams, their hopes and all that? I need to make that decision. Yeah.
Like that.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
So in those high pressure moments, Woon, as a layman, I'm just trying to get my head around this without being exposed to that level. But from a supervisor's perspective, and we're talking about rapport, how good you are at that, that's your one word. But to get people to go into the fire when everything in their being is telling them to go the other way. Yeah. How do you do that?
So firstly, I did go into CERT as a supervisor. Okay. Which meant, and I worked out very, very quickly, my very first job that I ever got deployed to is probably still in my top 5 most intense jobs. Okay, that was Ballara. Okay, now I worked out very quickly at Ballara. So we basically jumped out of the car and started opening fire straight away.
Okay, so just give us some context around the Ballara.
Okay, so a guy had was in a relationship with a girl. He went away, he came back, found out the girl was, being unfaithful, stole her car, went down to the pub, got in a few drinks, got into a fight, got in the car, rammed another police car, we get called, yeah? Mm-hmm. So we went to her house, after the general duties went to her house, and they found some tracks leading into the bush. They pull up into the driveway and they couldn't see a car, but they had enough sense to stay in the car. Whilst they're in the car, a shadow walks past their car, 2 massive knives in each hand, just on this one. And they went, locked the door, stayed silent, got on the phone to me, gave me updates. We were gunning down there as fast as we possibly could. Whilst he was in the house, which was his girlfriend's house, started killing everything that he could find, including animals, goldfish, staring into the wall, all that stuff, right? This guy was not well, okay? When we got there, as we were arriving, he stepped out with the knives, challenged one of the police officers. Police officer got out of the car, gun out, finger on trigger, starts depressing the trigger. Now, this particular officer ends up joining CERT, but this was when we arrived, and we were about 50 meters away. As we were stepping over the barbed wire fence, the farm fencing, we were letting rounds go.
Wow.
Because we could see him, right?
Engage.
Yeah.
Straight away.
Yeah. It was enough to get him back in the house, and from there we had a siege, right? It's my first job. And that's when I knew, that the team I had around me were 100 times more skillful, 100 times more experienced, and 100 times more capable than I ever will be.
Wow.
Because they've got all this training as operators before and I'm stepping straight into supervising them.
Yeah.
So
someone's got to do it.
Right. So I knew there were 2 different types of leaders, right? Yeah. There's leaders who are so skillful, like let's say Michael Jordan, which I, after watching the doco, realized that he's actually not a very nice person, but he's so good and he leads the team into success so often and so consistently, people will follow him. Yeah. I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Like I said, my whole life I've been average at best, a little bit above average in some things. Yeah. So I knew then that I wasn't going to win these guys over by showing them how good I was, because they're so much better than me. Because I went to that job and I was essentially useless. They just did it. They just did it all and made it work. We got him, we didn't kill anyone, and we arrested him and we handed the scene back over. And I did nothing, really. Yeah. I literally sat there and went, what am I doing here? Yeah. So that's when I knew I'm not going to win them by skill. I've got to win them by loving them, you know, and you talk about rapport. So my special power was, I just got to love these guys. I've got to care about them. I need them to know that I've always got their best interests in mind. So they trust me, yeah? But I also genuinely did too, you know what I mean? It wasn't an act, because you can't act it for 11
You can't
years,
fake
right?
it, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, you're right.
And so I guess you're right, rapport was my superpower,
Yep.
because I was genuinely really interested in the best for these guys.
Yeah.
And that paid off in the end.
So how did you set out and go about it? Did you have a plan, knowing what you know now?
You know, I didn't have a plan.
Yep.
So every opportunity I had, I just asked them.
Yep.
I was just curious, sometimes too nosy,
Yep.
into how their life was going. You know, a lot of people at the beginning wouldn't, you know, have a bar of it. But over time, I think they got to see my character a little bit too, and I was genuinely interested and I care.
Yep.
They start opening up.
Yep.
And it was that relationship
Yep.
that we had and that we'll always have with my team. And you talk about how, you know, what motivates people to run towards fire when most people are running away. And I think relationships are a big part of it. Knowing that the person to the left and to the right of you, one, have got your back, and two, you're not going to let them go in without you. So you're depending on each other. Yeah. If you say no and they say yes, you're leaving them out to dry. So relationship's a big one. And then the biggest one, to be honest, and we talk about this all the time, you know, they talk about arming security guards. Well, let's face it, you know, in schools in America, whatever it might be, you know, for $30 an hour, who's going to be running towards an active shooter? Not a lot of people. They'll be like, thank you very much. I'm out. Yeah. And they'll quit.
Yep.
It's the same for us, you know. It takes more than remuneration, lifestyle, leave, and all that to make people run towards fire.
Yep.
And so what makes you run towards fire when everyone else is running away is purpose and it's meaning, you know. Jung, Frankl, all these amazing giants that went before us said, he who knows his why can overcome any how. So linking people to their purpose, to their meaning, to why they get out of bed is what's going to get them across the line when they want to say no, right? And so quite often I would start a brief with the oath, right? Because there's not many jobs in society now, doctors being one, lawyers being the other, and all your emergency services, and you probably did in the ABF, swear an oath to serve your country. Yeah?
Remember it.
Yeah, that's linking them to a purpose, you know, sometimes a spiritual purpose at a higher level. That's what's going to get you through the door. Yeah.
But it's knowing those individuals too, isn't it? If you are talking from a spiritual capability, you already know that because you know the person.
Yes.
Yep. So you know what works. It's hearts and minds, isn't it?
Yes.
Connecting the hearts and minds. And you obviously knew that so well.
So that's two parts.
Yep.
The other part is team. Yeah.
Yep.
Quite often, so what we do, so about, let's say from what we call the final action point, yeah, we go noise discipline. After the final action point, we're about to breach a house, there is no changing your mind, right? We get up to the door. Before we breach the door or the windows, we're complete noise discipline. The only time we break noise discipline is when we breach. Now, when we breach, we have a stack. We're behind each other. We don't say a word, but we bump. Yeah, we send the bump up the line. And then when it gets to the front, we're in, yeah? Quite often, we'll feel the bump back. And that's that hesitation, that's that amygdala activating.
Wow.
But there's enough momentum in the team to get you to bump past that.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's an amazing feeling when you're in it.
Yeah.
You get that adrenaline dump. You know the boys are behind you. You know the boys are in front of you. You know you're not alone, and you know you don't want to let them down. And so that's enough to push you over that line in the end. Yeah. And all that other stuff, relationship, rapport, meaning, purpose, all that gets you to the line, and then it's the bump that gets you across the line.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how people just say it's that all the growth is on the other side of the fear?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. How do you reduce the fear though? Is exposure.
Yep.
Do as much exposure as close to reality as possible before the actual moment, because then your brain recognises the pattern. And I'll tell you the truth, Ben, and you know this better than anyone. It's not just tactical policing or the military or anything. Fear is fear. Yeah, fear is fear. The amygdala activation is an amygdala activation regardless of any context.
Yeah.
So this is relevant to anyone in society.
Yeah.
It's relevant to anyone in corporate. It's relevant to anyone in sport.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about how do we recognize the fear, overcome the fear,
Yeah.
and what's the work that we can do before in order to set ourselves up for a win. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And everyone can do this.
Yep.
Yeah. Everyone can do this.
What I enjoy about the fear aspect is that
Yep.
your body sensations
Yes.
are almost identical from fear to excitement. So if
Same
you have the
chemical.
ability to reframe fear and tell yourself no, you control the narrative.
Yeah.
I'm actually excited.
Yeah.
And the more you can do that and interchange the two,
Yeah.
when it does come to that fearful moment, if you've been telling yourself you're just excited because your body sensations are so similar,
Yeah.
it's an easier process to get into. It's an easier suit to put on. if you like.
Ben, you're spot on, right? It's control
Yep.
and it's choice.
Yep.
So if you have a fear and you avoid it, you're constantly looking for it to appear in your life. The response you get when it does appear is anxiety. However, if there's a fear in your life and you make a choice to confront that fear, the fear is still present, but psychologically, you go from anxiety to challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah? You go to anxiety to challenge.
Yep.
And that's how you build courage.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
So it's building that pattern in your life to become courageous. And you see courageous people walking around, you're like, man, they're so courageous. No, they've just chosen to confront their fear.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson talks about it really well.
Yeah.
About that stuff.
Yeah.
There are times where there's some things that'll happen that you can't prepare for. Yeah. And for me, that was Bourke Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
I thought I had done all the homework, but when I got to Bourke Street, my bucket was already full, and I can talk to you about that, you know, if we have time. But when I got to Bourke Street, the magnitude of Bourke Street was unlike anything I've prepared for or prepared my mind to see.
So context, again, Bourke Street. The year was...
2017,
Yep.
January, a guy drives a maroon Commodore, does burnouts in Flinders Street, drives down the footpath of Swanson Street, turns left up Bourke Street, drives through Bourke Street Mall and cleans up a ton of people. Okay?
Horrific.
Six died on the day.
Yep.
Okay. Now we've been chasing this guy for a few days. Okay.
Okay.
Different rules of engagement then to now. We would have stopped him a lot earlier then. Policy didn't allow us to. Things have changed
Okay.
because of coronial inquests and recommendations. Okay. So we still carry that, all of us still carry that burden, that we all knew that we should have stopped him earlier, but we didn't.
Okay.
So that's a heavy burden for us to carry. On the day, I was Bravo team commander, and so the only way that I would activate is for an emergency action, which is what happened when he got on the footpath and hit the first person. We were what we call echo. So the emergency action was activated. I was at Footscray Market at the time in a holding pattern, doing some gas training, yeah, with my team. As soon as we heard that come over the air, we were in the car. I'm not a great driver, but I still remember my two mates in the back and another sergeant to my left, they were like, man, the way that you drove that day, that was incredible. Like, we got there in record time, right?
I've been in peak hour traffic with you in Melbourne, mate. I know how it works.
Anyway, I pull up at Queen Street, right
Yeah.
at the scene where Garganzulis was stopped. Yeah. I get out of the car, we're trained medics as well, put my medic backpack on, two boys in the back and the sergeant, medic backpack on. We start running down the street towards Bourke Street Mall. And what I saw then was bigger than I'd ever imagined. There were just people lying everywhere, screaming, people coming out from buildings, defibrillators everywhere and all this, right? So because I only had a limited number of resources, my job as a team commander was to triage people, to see who needs help. And I remember I went to the first casualty, and she had already been worked on. And is what we call trauma naked. So we get people trauma naked so we can see where all the injuries are. So we can start on the most important, and hemorrhage is the most important, to stop the bleed. And I saw her legs, and it reminded me of my daughter. I won't name the dead, but if you look in the history, you'll know her name. 11-year-old girl. She reminded me of my daughter, and she reminded me of a girl that my wife and I were going to adopt when I was in the Sex Offences and Child Abuse Investigation Unit. And in that moment, I froze. I completely froze. And I didn't know where I was, I didn't know what I was doing. And we go back to the bump. And out of nowhere, Senior Sergeant Billy Duncan, who promoted me into this position,
Wow.
puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Woon, it's game time." And that was my bump to get through that threshold.
Wow.
And we were on.
Wow.
And he was like a guardian angel, came out of nowhere. One of the most experienced tactical operators in Victoria Police. And we run down Bourke Street together, and him hand in hand with me, mentoring me on the spot to do my job, right?
He's recognised in you.
He's just a good man.
Yeah.
He'd do it for anybody.
Yeah, wow.
He'd do it for anybody.
Yeah.
But he recognised me as the commander for CERT.
Yeah.
And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, let's go to work, man.
Yeah.
This is it. This is what we train for.
Yeah.
Let's go to work.
Incredible.
And that's all I needed.
Yeah.
Was to switch back on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I went down, did the length of Bourke Street, established a command post, and I was screaming out for the ambos to come in. And the first ambulance officer I was hoping to see would be a mica or in a truck. But the first ambulance officer I saw was Paul Holman, who was back then the chief of Ambulance Victoria.
No resources on him.
Well, I didn't know until months later when I debriefed with Paul. The policy was they weren't allowed to come in because of the hot zone. So I'm kicking myself, going, I should have declared it a warm zone earlier so I could get resources in. And so Billy and I quite often have the conversation when we see each other and go, do you reckon we could have saved more lives? And I don't know if we could have, but there were so many things I would have done differently that would have given us that chance to save more lives.
Yeah.
But, you know,
But
that's life.
I think if you look back on what you did do, the fact that you're there, I think you need to reframe that almost and go, the fact that we were here, hands on, you did everything, is the thing. You do the best with what you've got at that time.
Yeah, and with what you know.
With what you know. The amount of times we look back on any stage of our life and go, I woulda, shoulda, coulda, it's always there. Always there. Let alone a moment like that.
Yeah.
But
I don't, to be honest, you know, when we talk, I don't think we saved any lives that day. I think you know, I don't, you just don't know. And I think that's what we wrestle with. And for the next 12 months, it really laid heavy on the team and even the team that couldn't deploy. So we had another reserve capability back at the office and they wanted to come out. You know, you've almost got that survivor's guilt thing going on. They're traumatised. Like I still catch up with those guys and they're traumatised because they wanted to get out and they weren't being able to be released.
So they're waiting for the signal. They're waiting for that green light.
So I had other commanders in the unit
Yep.
going, nah, hold, in case there's other jobs going around that we need you for, there's not much more you can do, which is the right call, right?
Yeah.
But they wanted to get involved because their brothers and sisters were in the fight. Yeah, it's that again in the stack. I'm not going to let you down, so that's going to get me past the line. But nobody would let them pass the line. So there's trauma in that. So I spent the next 12 months after that looking after my team and in the process neglecting myself.
Yeah.
And then exactly 12 months to the day, so 2018, I had my first anxiety attack and I didn't know what that was. Disorientated, nauseated, couldn't see properly. But I had enough sense at the Geelong train station to ring another commander at CERT, which is one of my best mates, David Stocks, who's a tactical legend. And I rang him and he said to me, as soon as you get off the train, come to my office. But when I walked in, there was a job over the radio in my office for a job in Collingwood, a siege. So I put on the kit, went to the siege. When I finished the siege, looked at my phone, 20 missed calls from Stocksy and from another a legend, Steve Reynolds. And if it wasn't for those two, I wouldn't be sitting with you today. But missed calls from them as well. And the penny dropped. They knew, I knew that they knew there was something wrong with me. And so I was ordered to go back to the office, but I refused. I started driving to another call out in Mornington. Then I was given an order over the air. And if I didn't obey that order, I would have been charged. So,
But you don't want to let your team down.
I didn't want to go back because I knew what they were going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew that they were going to say that I couldn't do my job anymore.
Yeah.
So I got back in the office, and I still remember I was standing at the door, helmet under my left arm, still holding my rifle, vest on, balaclava around my neck, and I was standing in front of my inspector, and he goes, "Do you kit?" I said, "No." He goes, "Why not?" I said, "Because I don't know if I'll ever put it back on." And so he tried to convince me to take 3 days critical incident leave, and I refused. And he was able to convince me to take at least the rest of the shift off on one provision, that I speak to my psych, our unit psych. And my unit psych was amazing. Spoke to me for 3 hours all the way home. And I thought I was going back the next shift because that was the agreement with my inspector. And I didn't go back for 7.5 months. And thankfully for Victoria Police, for the services that was offered to me, and it doesn't happen to everyone because I know there's horror stories, but I was given the option to take as much time as I want, and I was given the option to either go through talk therapy or take drugs. But because I was given the support for talk therapy, I chose that. And for every day for 3 hours, I was in therapy for 7.5 months. And before I got back to work. But that had been the greatest gift for me. Because I was talking before that before every ascent, there's a descent. And I descended to the lowest of the low. And I'm talking like, there were some days I didn't want to live anymore, right? And so I was in such darkness. And my wife would remind me now, and I can't remember it, there were 3 or 4 days where I didn't even get out of bed, eat anything, and just drink a little bit of water. She remembers, I don't. But in that darkness is where I confronted my shadow, yeah? And I've been in the process ever since, and still today, where I'm integrating that shadow, yeah? And it's that integration between you and your shadow that creates that, that's how you become formidable, right? Yeah, because
no different to the fear we're talking about before, the fear factor we're talking about before, it's the same thing.
You know, Solzhenitsyn talks about this. The line between good and evil does not cut through political parties or anything like that. The line between good and evil cuts down the heart of every man. And we oscillate between those two lines every day, every day. And I remember I became conscious of this. It's during my time of recovery when I managed to get myself back in the car. I used to drive to the Barn prison and stare at that wall. And there was something within me that said to me, you are no different to the people on the other side of the wall. You are no different to the other side of the wall. You are capable of as much evil as those guys in, maximum prison. And they are capable of as much good as you on this side. So you are no different. The only difference is that you choose. Yeah. And so that's what, and I live with that today. And that's integrating that shadow. You got to understand your evil, your ultimate evil, and your also ultimate good. You know what I mean? And we all have the capability to choose between the two. So that's been my journey.
That's the cost of caring. Do you concur to that?
It's, yeah, maybe. Is it a cost or is it a gift?
Well, it's a gift. It's a gift, but it's almost a cost to be able to go through those moments that you don't think you'll actually get out of. Like, I often say, you've got to go backwards to go forwards.
Yes. It's the same as going down to go up.
Correct.
Yes.
It's so true.
Yes.
But a lot of people, when I say a lot of people, some people just wouldn't be able to get themselves out of that hole. And knowing, I think, what you've seen and what you've been through, which a lot of people haven't, I just wonder whether that's one of the reasons, and we haven't really touched on this too much now, but what you're doing now, do you think what you went through in terms of the talking therapy as opposed to the drug therapy that you spoke about? Big
time.
That's the reason why you do what you do 100%. Today? Talk to us about what you do today.
Coaching.
Yep.
Yeah.
So who do you have sort of like in terms of your leadership components to? You've got so many strings to your bow.
Yes.
What is it you do? What is it you enjoy about the coaching side of things? Because you help so many people and you touch so many people. And I think a lot of people can understand that now after listening to you on this podcast. But
yes.
What is it you enjoy about it?
Helping people reach their potential.
Yep.
And then push them over just a little bit more to increase their capacity.
Yep.
Because there's so much fulfillment in that, crossing that line. Do you know what I mean? To see people start here and end up here, even if it's a little nudge over that line. And you know this, Ben, you and I have been in, facilitating workshops before.
Yep.
And to see someone come in and then 8 hours later leave with a different realization, a different capability, it's the most fulfilling thing you'll ever do in your life.
Yeah.
And whether we do that individually with executives, with whoever, frontline workers or whatever,
Yeah.
whether we do that as a group in the workshop, doesn't matter, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You take them from one place, you move them to another, and it's great fulfillment.
It's the shift you can see too.
And it's also the shift that they make on their own.
Yep.
It's never anything that we do, you know this.
Well, no one's broken. No one's ever broken.
They've got the resources that they need to achieve whatever they want in life. Yeah. It's just about us encouraging them to do that and looking within themselves to do that. And that's coaching.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
So I'm sitting here thinking and listening to you talk about when you're leading operations and your team is so, you feel your team is so superior to what you are in those moments. And I think, you know, that stat we have 50 to 60,000 thoughts per day.
Yeah.
And 85% of those thoughts are negative or unhelpful in a way. I think there's a mixture of that plus knowing what you have been through now and what you've sort of been able to achieve. I hope you feel the other way about it because from where I sit, you've got so many superpowers. One of them is your ability to illuminate people. And I think that got you through a hell of a long way. And as a coach and as a person and as a good mate of mine, your ability to do that is first class. So on a career, I must say well done. And as a person and as a mate, I really appreciate what you do for me and so many other people too. So hopefully not so hard on yourself in other aspects, mate. But it's brilliant what you're doing.
Well, that's ironic, Ben, because you know, we're just discovering this illuminator and diminisher concept with David Brooks, but you know, I see you as the epitome of illumination, and you do that so well. And I think this is why we're sitting here today, because you know, the easy option for me would have been drive myself to the academy every day, because you know, as an introvert, that's my recharge time. But I could not be more blessed to have bumped into you in the toilet. and discovered you're from Geelong as well. So, and then having spent that 7 days together has been, you know, such a blessing on my life. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Keep kicking goals, mate. Fantastic. Really
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
the chat.
Appreciate it, mate.
Good man.
Awesome.
So for more information on how you or your organisation can work with Mindset 365 and go from where you are to where you want to be, get in touch at ben@mindset365.com.au or visit mindset365.com.au for more information on dates and programs currently running. Thanks again for coming along for the ride. Don't forget to start implementing some of those strategies learnt to become 1% better each day.